So we have 52 minutes. So if anyone would like to talk about anything, clarify anything we talked about yesterday or I talked about, or something fresh, and is anyone anything? Yes.
So Ajahn, with visiting the school yesterday, which was wonderful, and listening to you talk about the work that you're doing with the really working with the whole family and community, and then today the stuff with the family constitution, which was incredible. My question is, do you have plans to maybe write a book about all of that work to share some of those ideas with the greater world? And if not, could you make some?
I have this real problem with laziness, and the COVID's made it even worse than it was before. So, yeah, I guess it would be a good idea. I must admit, my mind is more focused on Thai language projects than English language, and I mean it's really quite rare for me to give a Dhamma talk in English these days. So, only a few, apart from if I go overseas, it's just very seldom. But you think there would be people interested in? I think one way of doing something like that is having some interviews and then transcribing interviews. That's kind of a bit easier for me. I'm just so kind of slow and picky when I write things. Takes a long time. But okay, I'll bear that in mind, and we'll see if we can come up with something.
We can definitely use some guidance in the West, bringing the Dhamma.
I was just reading this funny thing the other day where the father says to his son, if you ever need a helping hand, you'll find it at the end of your arm. So. I think I'd include that in the book. I think that all societies face this challenge of finding a balance between the needs and the welfare of the individual and of the group. And my impression is in America it's gone way far too far towards the individual, to the extent that there's hardly any common ground left. So this is from obviously someone reading and listening from afar. And then you have societies and cultures where it's too far the other way. Obviously somewhere like North Korea or even China. I think Thailand has developed quite a good balance. But there is a real fracture now between the older generation, the younger generation, who are really plugged into their screens, and that individualistic attitude is very strong amongst young Thai people these days. And something I'm interested in. One of the I gave a sort of keynote talk on this idea of you could even say like rebranding the Buddha's teachings as a technology for dealing with real life problems, as a means of trying to create some bridge with the younger generation who are in the cities in Bangkok, particularly, who are alienated from Buddhism at the moment. So what you hear from young people is, you shouldn't, what gives you the right to tell me to do this or do that? That's the kind of big thing. But I can't, writing a book, I can't really claim to have, all the answers. It's just, one small grassroots kind of project, and there's huge problems and lots of things that I don't really have very good answers for at the moment, so I would say. Yeah.
Ajahn, several of us here are considering ordination, and I was wondering what benefits young monks may have growing up in Buddhist culture like Thailand, what advantages there might be compared to the West, and in general, what advice you may have for young people looking for a place and a culture to ordain in.
I think that in that initial 5-year training, it is good to spend some time, at least a year or so of that 5 years, in a Buddhist culture, and if you have affiliation with Thailand and the Thai tradition. Some monks who are ordaining in Amaravati and Abhayagiri, they usually have a sabbatical year or a year, maybe their 3rd year or 4th year when they come to Thailand, and so it just it's sort of a lot of stuff that maybe you just take on trust when you enter the Sangha in the West, but it seems a bit weird, or you're not really feel that sense of commitment to it, and sometimes it can even seem a little bit kind of Monty Python, but then when you come to Thailand, you have a sense of, oh, this is where this has come from, and a sense of the history and the context and the environment, and so I think it gives you a much richer understanding of tradition, and I think to feel part of a lineage and a tradition going back to the time of the Buddha is a wonderful feeling for Buddhist monastic. And that really comes home when you spend some time here, I think. But I wouldn't say necessarily that would entail having to ordain here and spending the first 5 years. But I do think that sometime in that initial period, it's good to spend a rains retreat or a year here. There's just things like alms round. I mean, it's possible to go on alms round, of course, in the States now, and Ajahn Kovilo and Ajahn Nisapo, they do that, but there's a special feeling of going on alms round in Thailand and in a Buddhist country, and just feeling you're living your monk's life very similar to the way that monks did at the time of the Buddha. Then, so that you could say these are not really like essential or profound elements of the holy life, but they do give you this real sense of foundation and affiliation and love of the monk's life, and you feel that like the monk's life, it is a whole lifestyle, culture. It's I had this kind of idea, I think, before I became a monk. It was just like just being given this wonderful opportunity to meditate all day and all night and not have to worry about paying the bills and not having to compromise with the values and behavior of people around me. So, but then when I became a monk and seeing just how much richer and more fulfilling that the very life of a monk can be, and in a Buddhist culture like this, then where you're looked after so well, I think that the suspicion would be, where you monks in Thailand, you get really spoiled. But and I think if you weren't meditating and you didn't really have any integrity, if you like, that might well be the truth. But in fact, you just feel this incredible gratitude and responsibility to live up to the expectations, if you like, of the. It's not that people expect you to be super monk or super pure, but just keeping the rules of a monk is enough for most lay people to be very happy to support you in Thailand. But the genius of the Buddha is setting up this symbiotic relationship between the laity and the monastics in such a way that after a few years as a monk, you just feel this overwhelming desire. You want to give something back to the people who support you. And it's not like, well, this is expected of you or you should do it, but you just, in whatever way you can, you want to repay that, all that you've been given freely over the years. So these are things that just kind of gradually accumulate, and of course starting to develop that in the Western countries and in Baigiri or Seattle and Portland and there's places now. But this is kind of like the mature version, which has been in existence for hundreds of years. So I think it's just a privilege to be able to be a Buddhist monk in a Buddhist culture, and so I would recommend it at some time in your training. But I wouldn't say that you should therefore come here to ordain. That's dependent on other factors, and it's worth to take your family's wishes into account also. I mean, when I became a monk, my parents didn't really object to me becoming a monk so much. What was difficult for them was me being so far away, and so one of the wonderful things about having monasteries in the West is that people with monastic vocation, but it's just not possible, or it's just feel that they can't really be so far away from parents or for such a long time, can also be monks in their own home countries. So there are other factors involved, I think. Yes.
Ajahn, I was just wondering.
Would you mind taking your mask? So I could, yes. Yeah.
Ajahn, I was just wondering if you have any thoughts or tips, or how you stayed in robes for so long, especially being a Westerner.
Yeah, I'm not really a good person to ask that one. I'm a bit of an outlier, because I never wanted to do anything else, and before, and I've never wanted to do anything else since the day I walked in. I just took to it like a fish to water. There's nothing that I wanted to do in my life that I couldn't do as a monk. So there's no reason ever to, and I just love the life. I love the practice. It's just everything that I want and need is found within this form. But that's obviously not the case for many monks. And what I would counsel young monks, firstly, to make a vow to stay as a monk, come what may, for preferably 5 years, but at least 3 years, because it's so it's very easy to leave the monkhood, and you're not going to be forced or the subject of even emotional blackmail to stay. At the most, what would happen is if you young monk wants to leave is say, well, look, don't make a hasty decision that you'll regret afterwards. Maybe go and move and stay in that monastery for 3 months or so on, and if you still feel the same way, come back, and then okay. So there's that sense of don't make hasty decisions. But because it's so easy to leave, then it's a cause of doubt, and when you meet a problem of some kind, then your mind tends to diverge. It's like one part of your mind is, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to get through this? And then another part of your mind is saying, just give it up, just forget it, disrobe. So if you make that kind of vow, then you're not losing all that energy and time and stress in thinking about, should I disrobe or should I stay, or can I deal with this or can I not? You just bear with it. So that's a source of great strength. The other advice I would give to young monks is, don't put all your eggs into the meditation basket. Don't have your sense of self-respect or self-esteem or identity as a bhikkhu too bound up with meditation. And that's, of course, like the heart of the holy life, for sure. But it's not the only organ, to extend that analogy. I mean, and just finding that joy in say, like things like alms round, in living with people who share your goals and your aspirations and your values, and people who are living to a very high standard of morality, people that you can trust. And where in the world can you find the quality of friends you can find in the Sangha? I was visited by an old friend of mine, Ajahn Khemasiri, who's been the abbot of a monastery in Switzerland for many years, and I've known him since 1978 when I was a anagarika, and we rarely see each other. I mean, I saw him earlier this year, but we can go 3 or 4 years without seeing each other. And then we sit down and we just have a cup of tea, and it's just like carrying on a conversation from yesterday. And so many monks have the same feeling. It's not like you live together for any great period, but there's just a sense of, we're doing the same thing, where we have the same goals and values and the shared tradition. So finding joy in that sense of good friendship, leading and in your sila, right from day one, you can be proud of your sila. And I say to monks, when you put on the robes, in what way are you different from lay people? And there's a lot of young monks, Western monks, who feel very guilty. Here's my mind full of all these defilements, and these people are bowing to me and offering things to me, and I think they probably got a purer mind than I do. And that kind of and my answer to that is, what differentiates you from the day that you become a monk is not the purity of your mind and your samadhi or so. It's your sila, and that's the difference between a monastic and a layperson, and that's in a Thai or monastic, a Buddhist culture, that immediately earns you the greatest respect. And if you were to dress like this, if the three of us, we had a time machine and we were to go back to, say, Savatthi 2,500 years ago, and we walk into the monastery, and it'd be Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, Venerable Ananda, and our robes might be slightly different, but we'd all, we would be accepted immediately, not because of any, necessarily because of any attainment, but simply we're living within this form. So that kind of reflection, using yoniso manasikara, using skillful reflection to give this what we call samana sanya, this conventional perception of yourself as a bhikkhu, as a monastic, and that wholesome pride in being a monk and in being a monastic, and just feeling blessed to be able to live this kind of life. So this is giving you a kind of a broad sense of well-being and contentment, which is not going to be completely blown away when you have difficulties in your meditation, because you will have ups and downs in your meditation, and as a young monastic, there's a lot of service and a lot of things to do for others, and it's not always so conducive to formal practice. And some young monastics can say, I had better meditation when I was a layman. What am I doing here? So you have to take sort of big picture and long-term perspective. And yes, at the back.
Ajahn, this is sort of a related question. So what quality have you found most helpful?
Well, apart from all the ones that you'd find in the suttas, I would say sense of humor, probably. Not taking everything, like, sometimes, this is actually sort of fetishized, not taking everything seriously. So I mean, in terms of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, then very serious. Don't make jokes about those. It's at all. But in terms of seeing defilement and just seeing human nature, as often quite funny, it's just the way things are is actually quite humorous, and greed, hatred, and delusion, and all of these things, they're what we're working on, but at the same time, it's really funny, So just being able to see that side of things sometimes, I think is really, really helpful. When monks are together, we always have a great time, It's just, but of the traditional virtues, I guess patience is probably the one, certainly, that Ajahn Chah emphasized above all others, and the Buddha, of course, praised it as the supreme incinerator of defilements. So I think patience doesn't have the same kind of romantic appeal of samadhi and all these things, and sometimes monks, they go off on tudong and or some trip, and they'll come back and, well, what did you get from? Well, I didn't really get some. I guess I got some kind of developed some patience. It's like patience is the consolation prize, where you don't get anything more profound. But actually, patience is in itself a really profound Dhamma, and in long term, actually more benefit than some short-term meditation experiences.
It's a real pleasure to spend with you these days. I had a question for Ajahn Dunn, and I didn't have an opportunity to ask. Maybe I could ask the Akon.
Yeah.
He writes in his autobiography about his mother's great compassion for animals, and that she once went to a fish market where there were live fish and set them free in the river. And the villagers were quite impressed with that. I was very moved reading that. And I was just thinking of all the times that I've seen animals in captivity that I've known were headed to the slaughterhouse, and have felt a real sense of helplessness.
Yeah.
A feeling that radiating metta for those animals just doesn't feel like enough. And I'm wondering if you feel like there's anything else we can do in practice to support the ultimate ease or liberation of animals that we know are in misery and will be killed.
Yeah, in fact, I was just talking on this topic a few days ago, and I said, as a thought experiment, imagine you're living on another planet, and you win the lottery. You come on holiday and on Earth, and you're going to land in a country called Thailand. So you do some research and you read up about Thailand, and you say Thailand's a Theravada Buddhist country, and what are the main tenets of Theravada Buddhism? And then suppose you were to speculate the kind of country that you would expect to find, and the kind of things that you would find there and the things that you would not. And of course, there's quite a huge gap, I think, between what you would expect and I think it's valuable to investigate the reasons for that discordance. And in Thailand, I think the huge blind spot in Thailand is the growth of factory farming over the past 20 years. And the incredible, I'm sure you know, the incredible cruelty inflicted on chickens and pigs and in particular. And I find it, I don't know how I just find it somewhat shocking that in a Buddhist country there's so little even spoke about, or there's very little opposition to it. And I think it's just gone under the radar for some reason, and I want to be talking about this in public more in the future. I think in the West, you could say, the two cultural, the two kind of value systems most prominent. If you have like the theistic Christian, talk about Europe and America, underlying ideas of God creating human beings, then creating animals to be at the service of human beings, and the idea that animals are there for us, and the idea that animals don't have souls in the way that human. You could imagine why that could eventually lead to something like factory farming. The other culture, the materialist view is that animals don't have any feelings at all, and that if you see an animal screaming or showing signs of pain, then that's something that you're projecting onto something which is basically just nothing more than a sort of a meat machine. So when you have those two kind of ideas very central to a culture, then factory farming is imaginable. But in Thailand, where you have a Buddhist culture where dominant belief is in rebirth, and that animals have consciousness, and all animals seek to be happy and don't want to suffer, and that we have this word like all sentient beings in Buddhism. That's a unique. Where else is that? You'd have loving kindness for all sentient beings without exception in every realm. Buddhism is a universal religion, and yet factory farming is now prevalent throughout this country, and so it is a very clear conflict with Buddhist values, and so I think that what can I do? It's just to publicize the fact. Do you realize this is going on, and that it's in clear conflict with the values that you profess? So as a bhikkhu, that's the kind of thing that I can do. As far as sort of more activism, I think that's something that a bhikkhu's not allowed to take part in. yeah, I think it's awful, terrible, and yeah.
I wanted to ask a question that is maybe particular to my personal practice about death contemplation. I think that for me, death contemplation is going to be incredibly important and maybe even central to my practice because of my experiences as a nurse and my experiences seeing people at the moments of their death. But also because I often see images and imagination in my head of my own death very frequently. And this really intimidates me. Actually, I'm having two issues with this. Is that first of all, this really intimidates me because I feel that this could be a really incredibly powerful path to insight. And I don't want to do it wrong, and I don't know which practice to take up in terms of death contemplation, and so I'm very cautious. But also because when I see these images, and I imagine my own death in a variety of different ways, actually I feel a lot of desire that it should happen, and I also I'm very nervous if that's happening, to bring that contemplation to the forefront, because I think that's very dangerous. And I'm wondering what your advice would be on how I can utilize these powerful experiences around death in order to benefit my practice without hurting me.
Yeah, to begin with, sort of the broadest question here, and this is how do we relate to anything or anyone or any experience, any event, anything at all in life, and the Buddha's answer is based on kusala dhammas and akusala dhammas, wholesome, unwholesome dhammas. So whatever the phenomena might be, or whatever we're talking about, if we're relating to that in such a way that unwholesome dhammas are increasing and wholesome dhammas are decreasing, then that's something to draw back from. If, on the other hand, overall, wholesome dhammas are increasing, unwholesome dhammas are decreasing, then that is something to pursue. So having more and more of a direct experience and really understanding what that means, what a wholesome dhamma is and what an unwholesome dhamma is, that's part of practice and becoming familiar with the movement of the mind and being able to use that framework of wholesome and unwholesome to distinguish between different mental states in a more and more sophisticated and way. Secondly, I think that any meditation practice, where even if you're living under the tuition of a great teacher, and very few people, even monks, have that opportunity these days, there is always a certain amount of trial and error involved, because everyone does vary in some degree, and there's not this is, anyone says this is the technique, you just apply this technique, this will, I don't believe that to be true. It's a bit like a physician or a doctor saying, this medicine or this treatment, it's always a matter of statistics. You say like 80% of people who take this or benefit from it, but it's never like 100%. And how do you know you're not in the 20% or the 15%? So there's a certain amount of uncertainty there. So even if you have like a really a method that's sort of guaranteed by a great teacher, then it's still not sort of cast iron, no need to think, no need to worry, no need to doubt anymore. it's still, you need to have that quality of observation and sharpness of mind. So that's, it's very good that you've observed that. And one of, I think, the really important distinctions to make in Dhamma practice is between, in motivational terms, between chanda and tanha. Are you familiar with this distinction? Yeah. So chanda is primarily the will, the desire, the passion to do, whereas tanha is focused on the result of the effort rather than the effort itself. And of the three kinds of tanha, you have this vipawa tanha, just wanting things to go away and that can manifest as just desire for death and just turn off the switch, just sort of say goodbye to everything, and that can be quite a powerful energy and like a magnet in your mind that can draw more wholesome motivations towards it and engulf it. So you've noticed that, and so that's just something to be really wary of. If that, be really studying and observing that vipawa tanha and the different ways and guises in which it appears in your mind. So vipawa tanha underlies a lot of other things, like a lot of dullness in the mind and sleepiness in meditation. That it's just wanting to turn off the switch, or in any kind of conflicts and disagreements with people where you just want to sort of walk out and I just don't need this right now. That's kind of like vipawa tanha. So it's not going to be something that only manifests while you're doing the marana sati. You'll see it in other areas of your practice and your life, and so that's something that you really need to keep an eye on. So you have a practice that you feel a real affinity to it with, but whatever practice is going to have traps and dead ends and wrong turnings and challenges along the way. So you're not going to, as I say, you're not going to find a practice that's going to be free of all those difficulties and just like sort of highway to nibbana. But being aware of and learning. So if you look at it more as a learning process, so this you're learning through maranasati. You're learning about the different kinds of tanha. You're learning about chanda. You're learning how to develop wholesome motivation, how to prevent the mind from developing unwholesome motivation, how to protect your mind as you follow this path. So during the meditation itself, you don't want to be second guessing yourself or reviewing, but after a meditation and after a period of meditation, or after, say, if you've done a retreat, a 7-day, 10-day retreat, then really review what went on and to what you may need to tweak and to just readjust. And it may be that you just need to put that aside for a while and just need to do some a balancing more the sort of metta practice, the Brahmavihara practices, bringing up this positive emotion, and then come back to that again when the mind's been strengthened by some other virtues that we need to develop on the path. So, that would be my answer.
Maybe just actually one final question. 1.5.
Yeah. Depends on that.
Thank you so much for everything, Ajahn. I've been practicing on deepening my sila, protecting my sila more, and it's been really a wonderful, very important part of my practice. But I'm also noticing, as my sila is getting stronger, my standards are getting higher for myself, and sometimes what comes up is just a lot of mental proliferation around beating myself up if I'm not meeting my own standards or felt like I made some kind of mistake. And I feel like some of that is good because I don't, I want to keep
keep making my sila stronger and learning from my mistakes. But I'm wondering what the middle path there is, because
Yeah.
it can also affect, my meditation quite a lot.
I think a lot of people, when they start to take this training of conduct, which we call sila, more seriously, then there's a period where you just feel like you're missing out on everything. You're missing out on a lot of things you used to enjoy, maybe as a lay person, and that you still haven't sort of realized any of the sort of the spiritual fruits of it. So it can be a kind of a dry period. But with sila, as you say, your standards are elevated, and it's a little bit like wearing white. Just the smallest little stain becomes immediately visible, but it's not like actually more stain than before. It's just you're more aware of it. So it's a sign of evolution and progress, actually. I think you may remember in Ajahn Chah's life, where he felt intimidated by the huge number of precepts and training rules, particularly in the commentarial tradition, and he's just someone who's just so sort of committed, and yet he felt even with this that I just don't think that I can keep all these rules. And when he spoke to Ajahn Mun about this, then Ajahn Mun said, "You just two things, like hiri ottappa, this wise, intelligent fear and shame. If you really maintain those, then everything else that you need to practice will come quite naturally." So this is an essential part of sila, is this. So again, I would sort of explain it in the book, but these words are so weighted with baggage from other traditions, aren't they? So at least how I use it, like here, wise shame means that you're developing, you're constantly reflecting upon your values and your standards and your responsibilities, as a human being, as a Buddhist, as a daughter, or as a wife, or whatever it might be, to the extent that they're so there, like in the front drawer of your mind, so that when there is an intention to act or speak in such a way which is in conflict with those values, that you're immediately aware of it. So it's this sense that this is in conflict with my values and what I really aspire to in my life. And so that's the cognitive side of it, and the affective side of it is this just sort of drawing back from it, and that sense of drawing back from something, like that's what we call shame in Buddhism. So it's based upon the cognition of conflict between our action, speech, and our values, so that the more that you become clear about your values and aspirations, then the stronger that is protection for you. And the fear is the wise fear comes from reflection again on the law of karma. And so when there is this desire to act in such a way, then you realize I'm creating karma which will have this kind of result, short term, long term, because myself suffering, other people suffering. I really don't want that, So that's what we call that fear. Again, there's this cognition that we're creating bad karma, and it's going to have results which will cause suffering for ourselves and others, and it's this sense of fear. So it's a specific, very special kind of shame and fear, based upon wise reflection. And those are the foundations for sila. These two qualities, the Buddha called them the protectors of the world. They're the guardians of the world. I think that speaking with people who feel a lot of remorse or shame, the conventional guilt and shame about about things in the past that they've done and said. So these are sila related. My advice is always to look at it not in terms of a person who did this and failed or just gave into defilement and so on, but you say that at any moment, let's say there's some kind of stimulus through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, and there's a reaction or a response. And at any particular moment, that's going to be determined by the relative strength of kusala dhammas or akusala dhammas in your mind. So if you look back to an occasion where you felt you acted badly, what really went on there? Well, because the power of greed or anger or jealousy or whatever had this amount of strength, and the quality of hiri and ottappa and mindfulness and patience was like this, so the power of akusala dhammas exceeded the power of kusala dhammas, and so it was quite natural what happened. So when you look at it like that, then rather than saying, "Oh, I'm a bad person because I did that," you say, "Well, how can I prevent that from happening?" Well, I've got to reduce the power of the akusala dhammas and increase the power of the kusala dhammas. So on the next time, the kusala dhammas will be more stronger and will be more fluent and will come out and respond to the situation. So if we get away from this idea of me being a good person or a bad person, and being able to see that moment by moment what's really happening is this flow of kusala dhammas and akusala dhammas, and that's something that we can cultivate. We can learn how to abandon the akusala and develop kusala. So you set yourself high standard. If it's not unreasonably high standard, so that's also something to bear in mind. If it's too idealistic, then that's a problem in itself. But if you feel it's a reasonable kind of standard, and you fall away, well, what happened there? What was I lacking? The mindfulness wasn't strong enough, patience wasn't strong enough. There was too much pride there, or there was too much conceit, or so. These are things that you can work on in future. So I think rather than causing discouragement, is essentially it's clarified exactly where I need to be applying effort in future. I think as far as the establishing standards, and don't ever get this, I've been practicing this long enough, I should be able to do this, or that whole kind of should and shouldn't let's just throw that out the window. Don't get into that one. Just be realistic, where you are right now. And so as a lay person, sometimes people get really, oh no, I got to be really strict now, and I'm not gonna look at YouTube, I'm not gonna listen to music, and I'm not gonna do all these things, and I'm gonna be really strict. And I think it's all right. Every now and again, watch a movie, look at it, just relax, enjoy yourself a little bit. You don't have to be so super strict. I mean, you're honest with yourself. It's not just like a habit when you're stressed or when you're depressed or something. Eat something or watch something, and so obviously that's a problem. But for lay life, the 5 precepts is a very practical standard. And every now and again, just relax a little bit, and so probably not something you expected to hear from a Buddhist monk, but I've seen so many people who just push themselves too much, and then you get this boomerang effect. It's like push, and it comes right back like that, and then you feel you're hopeless. But it's just you have to be wise, and just gradually incremental, and just things sort of happen by themselves. You find we're just less and less. You have less and less interest in doing this and looking at that. So I just in terms of establishing, the analogy I have is like let's say playing tennis. I say if you play tennis with someone who's much inferior to you. You win 6 love, that's boring. Who wants to, very few people. I think that maybe some narcissists might like it, but generally, it's not. But then if you play with someone who's much better than you and they beat you 6 love, you don't want to do that either. But the ideal is if you play with someone who's just a bit better than you, and then you find you're playing strokes and you're playing better than you've ever done. It's like they draw out something that you didn't know you had. So that's the idea of how to establish some goals to work towards. It's just a little bit difficult. You really have to stretch a little bit, and then you find that, I didn't realize I could do that. I could do more than I could do. But if it's way up there, it's just too much. Okay. Yes, okay, so we have a photograph time. Where should we do that?
Do 3 sadhus.
Yeah.